Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Welcome, dear brothers and sisters, to this session to continue the topic of family in Islam from fiqh and life experience. We discussed in the previous session the introductions to know the rights of husbands and wife in Islam, and we covered some of the rights of husbands or rights of wives upon the husbands, or the obligations of the husbands towards the wives. And today, inshallah, we'll continue with the same methodology to cover some of the mutual rights and obligations between the wives and the husbands from the Islamic perspective. And also we will divide the lecture to three major parts. The first part is what is before the rights and the rights, and what should be after the knowing the rights and obligations of each one of the spouse, of the husband or the wife. So let's start with the stations before duties. Of course, we have to understand that a right of a wife, for example, or a right of a husband, for example, from the Islamic perspective, is not necessarily the same right of the husband from the world view or other world view, not the Islamic world view. Let's say different things. For example, the right of the wife to give her the maintenance. We find that from the Islamic perspective, it is a strict obligation on the husband to provide the wife or his wife with the maintenance or with the necessary maintenance. But in other world view or in other systems in the world from which organize the relationship between the man and woman, we can find that it is not an obligation upon the husband. We can find that the wife is required to provide as much as the husband or the man is also required to provide maintenance. So they share their obligation from this perspective. But from an Islamic perspective, we can find the difference or the big difference between both of them. So before also we can discuss some of the rights and obligations, we have to emphasize that the current world view of let's say masculinity and femininity, which means that how the world is looking to the woman as a wife and how the world is looking to the man as a husband. Of course, the overall view of masculinity and femininity nowadays in large segments of this concept contradicts the Islamic teachings or cannot match or cannot be in line with the Islamic teachings anymore. As we said before, as we gave an example before, there are many rights and obligations which are required by the new system or the new view or the current world view of masculinity and femininity, which will be in consequence, which will be fall into a contradiction between with the Islamic teachings. So let's have to focus on this point more clearly, because nowadays we can find that large segments of women are impacted or influenced with the trend of feminism, and also we have some practices or some social practices on the other side which influences the practice of men. Both are two parties or two sides of certain extremist thought regarding the essence of the concepts of masculinity and femininity, or what should be expected from the man and what should be expected from the woman. We have to say that Islam is deen al-wasatiyya, or the deen of moderation. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Thus we have made you a moderate nation, a nation that cannot be in any case in the side of extremism, whether to the left or to the right, whether to the side of men or to the side of women, whether to the side of terrorism or violence, or to the other extreme side of leniency, and so on and forth. So a part of the characteristic of the Ummah is that it is a moderate nation. And that's Allah, the Prophet ﷺ, was described by Aisha radiallahu anha as a sin. That he was moderate, and he used to choose the moderate option as long as it is not a sin. So what is the moderate, or what is the Islamic approach of masculinity and femininity? We have in Islam, we have the concept of equality and the concept of integrity or integration. What is the concept of the equality, and what's the concept of integration? For Islam, in Islam, the human being, all human beings are the same, are equal in terms of certain aspects of their life and their kind. Let's say, for example, in terms of equity, in terms of responsibility, in terms of serving Allah, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on all of these aspects, which cannot or which doesn't require certain segregation from the gender perspective. In these aspects, in all of these aspects, they are equal. Men and women, males and females, masculinity and femininity are the same, having the same obligations, have the same rights, have the same responsibilities and rewards in the day of judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described this in the Quran in many verses, that there is no difference between a man and a woman, if a male and a female, in terms of having the responsibility or taking the responsibility, doing the acts of worship, and having the reward as a day of judgment, or having the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In terms of financial transactions, we have also the same equity between men and women. Both have the same rights of owning something, inheriting something, buying or selling something. Both can have their own personality in doing their transactions or their businesses. So they are the same. In terms of other things which can be labeled as these things cannot in any way influence or impact being a man or being a woman. So in all of these cases, we will have the equal rights and obligations, or the principle of equity, as long as we are all human beings. But also we have another aspect of this relationship or this communication, which is integration. That man have some characteristics which the woman don't have, and the women don't have, and the woman also have some characteristics which the men don't have. In these cases, we will fall into injustice when we consider or expect from them the same tasks or the same jobs to do. We witness the difference in the physiological difference between men and women. Men have their muscles, their body, their power, and women doesn't have these kinds of things. We have the feelings or the emotions we have or we witness that it is way high at women more than the men. So we have different differences in the physiological aspect, in the even psychological aspect. We have different approaches from which men are looking at things and women are looking at things. So in these aspects, in which the kind of being a man or being a woman will influence the decisions or the function of any person, in these cases, Islam is shedding the light on which part is the responsibility of the men, which part is the responsibility of the women. So this is the case, and Islam is not all the way with equity, which entails some injustice to men and women in certain cases, and also it is not all the way with integration or with the principle of they are not equal. They have the same characteristics in certain cases, so that they are equal, and they doesn't have the same characteristics in other cases in which they will not be equal, and they will be required to do different things and different responsibilities. The current world view of masculinity and femininity is totally different. It is either on this side or other side. The principle of equity is considered to be imposed on every aspect of men and women. So we have to separate and to differentiate and to receive our understanding and our acknowledgement of what are the rights and obligations of us as a man or a woman or a husband or wife. So we have to receive this with a mentality that is not influenced with by the current or by the widespread modern worldview of masculinity and femininity. Of course, I will not try to shed the light on the status of women and men in the current world and how they are required to share everything. Everything, I mean everything: the housing, the expenses, and at the end of the day, as one of the scholars said, they are trying to secularize the relationships between even the man and the woman, the husband and the wife, and even the father and the sons and daughters, and or the mother and sons and daughters. They are trying to impose secularism in every aspect of life, so that we find different approaches and different things which can be in many cases contradicting the Islamic approaches and concepts of different things. So let's try not to be influenced with the mainstream worldview or secular worldview of masculinity and femininity. We have some concepts which are not even taught, which are not existed nowadays in the secular world. Such as, for example, chastity. Chastity, for example, is something which is absent. It is a fitra in the human beings, whether they are males and females, and it is in the females more and more, of course. But nowadays, we can find this value is absent from the secular societies. The same for different things like we have a total absence of many of the values that characterize or discriminate the human beings from any other animals. So we have a major differences between the Islamic worldview of masculinity and femininity and the secular worldview of masculinity and femininity. So if we are trying to judge these rights and obligations, of course we have to judge from the Islamic perspective, not from the secular perspective. Also, we have nowadays also we have a disruption or a distort of the concept of who is a man or who is a woman. We can find men nowadays are doing boutiques and wearing a women clothes and even put different things on them, and they are beautifying themselves exactly as they are women. If you look at them, you can find, or you can say, this is a man or this is a woman, or this is a man or this is a woman. Exactly on the other side, we can find the women are doing the same for resembling the shape of men. So they are shaving their head and they are wearing as a man wear, and they are doing some things also. You can find them, this is a man or not. So who is the man, or who is the real man? A question which can be considered as one of the major points of differentiation between the Islamic worldview and the worldviews that they are trying to impose it on, especially on the Muslim countries nowadays. A man in Islam is required to do some things, and the women are required to do other things. The man is required to appear in certain cases, and the women are required to appear in certain with certain conditions. The man is required to do fighting, jihad, to do allowance, or to provide the allowance, to provide the shelter, to provide the protection, to provide anything that requires a power or a masculinity. While on the other hand, the women also are required to do totally different things. So there is no mixture in Islam between the entity or the essence of men and the essence of women. Brother, you can go to slide number 14. Slide number 14. Also, as we said before, Also, as we said before, before we know the right or obligation of a husband and a wife, we have to emphasize that it is a contractual relationship that is a relationship based on a contract, not a blood relationship. That means we have to specify, or we have to emphasize on who should do what, or what is the rights and obligations of the husband, and what is the rights and obligation of the wife. Of course, it will not be a mere contractual relationship or a mere contractual responsibilities. We have different values or other values which will govern the relationship, but this aspect of the relationship is very important to know, and very important to be specific and to be clear from the beginning, from establishing the contract itself. Why? Because this relationship is exposed to be broken anytime. Of course, Islam describes the relationship between the man and woman as wife and husband are one of the strongest relationships, but this doesn't mean we have to waste the rights and obligations, and we have to make it a messy contractual relationship in which the woman doesn't know what to do, or the man doesn't know what to do. So apart from it being the most strongest relationship between a man and a woman, it should be or it should reflect or express the contractual responsibilities clearly in the contract, or even not necessarily in the contract, but within the mentality of the man and the woman. Also, one of the stations or points before we discuss the issue of rights and obligation is that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to the men and the women in his book in terms of this relationship, in terms of this specific relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a verse or two verses which are misunderstood, which can be misunderstood from many people in terms of giving a preference to a man and a woman and these verses are usually quoted in many misconceptions around or related to the status of women in Islam. The first verse is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ. So women have rights similar to those of men equitably. So this is the translation of وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Although men have a degree of responsibility above them. In the verse itself, it says, although men have a degree above them in this generality. But the translators are trying to reflect or trying to adopt some of the interpretations of these verses, which has been inserted into the translation itself. As Dr. Mustafa Khattab said, a degree of responsibility. And this degree of responsibility is not the interpretation of Dr. Mustafa, but the interpretation of Ibn Abbas, interpretation of the major companions and the scholars of Islam. So from a general perspective, they might see the men have a degree over the women. That means the men are giving the preference to women, which is not correct. What is muhkam in these verses or in the Quranic view of this is that they are equal from the aspects that doesn't require a difference, such as the responsibility and doing righteous deeds and the reward at the day of judgment. All of these aspects cannot or doesn't have the difference in kind, or doesn't entail a difference in kind, or doesn't require something more than the nature of the man himself or the woman herself. So as long as all of them can do the same, then they are equal. But what's the degree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given to the men over the women is a degree of responsibility, that they are responsible to house, to maintain, to advise, to educate, and to protect the woman. So this degree is not a degree of preference, it is a degree of some obligations to do or some things to do. And in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. In the translation of the verse, it is said, men are the caretakers of women, as men have been provisions or provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over women and tasked with supporting them financially. So بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this part of men is clear, that they are usually have to work, they are usually the one who have to earn money or to spend money. That's why they have the obligation of take care of their women, whether they are wives or mothers or sisters, whatever the kind of relationship, you will find the man is the person who is required to provide the woman. For example, a woman is a sister. Her brother, if she doesn't have a father, of course, or a husband, her brother is the man who is required to provide her with provision, or with necessary provision. The same for a husband, the same or for a son. So you can find that whatever the kind of relationship between men and women, you will find the aspect or the side of men are required to take care or to provide the aspect of the side of women. So it is a kind of knowing and acknowledging the different tasks and different responsibilities, and which will also have some of the consequences of what is required from the man and what is required from the woman as rights and obligations, as we will see inshallah. Also, one of the points to be discussed in this regard is that, and this is especially for the sister, is that let him, your husband, enjoy his masculinity, and you will enjoy it too. Means a man is a man by nature, and what enriches the feelings of masculinity in men is that they can do some things which the woman cannot do, from the characteristics or from the perspective that they have their specific characteristics of being more powerful, of being more masculine, of being having the financial support or religious or teaching advice, and so on and forth. So try to not to challenge this aspect in men, and try not to demand some of these characteristics and take it by yourself. Of course, in some cases, a woman are required to do so due to the lack of men or due to something, any circumstances, but we are speaking in general, that let the men be men and let the woman be woman. And even for small things like just as simple as it is, you can give him some tasks or some functions which require power or a masculine effort, and you can say this is your part. He will be happy for this, and try to implant this feeling within him if he lacks him due to the influence of the current or the modern worldview. Try to be on the moderate side of segregation between men and women, in light of the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah, not in light of the secular worldview or the opposite side. So demanding the rights and obligations should be from this perspective, and from a Sharia perspective, from the Islamic perspective, not from any other perspectives. Let's go to the next part, which is the duties station. The duties station mean the things that are required from women in general. Some other things which will be mutual obligations, and some others will be specific obligation or one-side obligation, as we did in the previous lecture when to categorize the rights and obligations to mutual rights and obligations and one-side rights and obligation. The mutual one will be shared, the same right or obligation is shared between the man and the woman, and the one-side right and obligation will be like it is only the right of the wife or the right of the husband, or the obligation of the wife or the obligation of the husband. So the first thing to discuss here is to know and appreciate the position of husbands, or his position from you. We have the verses before, which was that the men have more responsibilities, more powers, more obligations to do, so that they have the position of leading the family, or having the power of the family, and he will be exposed to the necessary decisions or necessary tasks which requires a leader, or which requires a position of power. So it is considered in Islam that a man has a step before the woman in this aspect. We have, of course, some of the mutual rights and obligations, and this also can be understood from many other perspectives, but in general, this is the case that he has the leading power. He can lead the family, and this is part of being masculine or being a man in general. We have two cases which were quoted by Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. As he said before, in the Jahiliyyah, before Islam, we didn't count any importance to women. So this was the practice of Jahiliyyah, that they didn't count any importance for women. They didn't listen to them in any advice, or they didn't consult with them with any matter. Even if they marry them or they divorce them, they didn't consult them. But Umar also said, radiallahu anhu, until Islam came and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides them with the known rights, for women, whether as a mother or as a wife or as a sister, or even a woman in general. So we can find that it is a mutual right and obligation to know and appreciate the position from each other, whether the man from the woman and the woman from the man. In this case, we have to emphasize that this higher step of leading or of responsibility cannot in any way justify the prosecution or any kind of harm to the women. So the man cannot in any way make use of this higher step to make injustice to the women. And the woman is, on the other hand, also have to know and appreciate this, and try to put things in its right order and in its right direction. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a long hadith, said to one of his companions when he tried to prostrate for him. One of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the Sham at this time, and he finds that they are prostrating to their priests. Then once he came back, he prostrated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "Why you are doing so? Why you are prostrating for me?" The man said, or the companion said, I saw them in Sham, they are prostrating to their priests, and you are more worthy to be in this rank, and you are more worthy for the people to prostrate to you. The Prophet ﷺ educated the companion and said to him that there is no one should prostrate for another one. There is no person should prostrate for another person. And if in case I command someone to prostrate to the other one, I will command the wife to prostrate to her husband from the greatness of his rights upon her. So this is the way that we have to understand the position or the different levels. The different levels is not for this is the preference, or this is kind of preference, or men are given a superiority over the women. This rank is a rank of or this level up is a level of responsibility and obligation, and that's why things will be considered. The second point is to live with them in kindness, which is a mutual right and obligation between the men and the women. So the men have the obligation to live with their wives in kindness, and this is the verse. The verse addressed the men to live in kindness with their women, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. So second please. So the women, the men are required to live with their wives in kindness as established in the Quran, and the women are required to do the same also. To live with them in kindness is a kind of mutual right and obligation between the men and the women. And as we said before in the previous session, that this kind of right and obligation covers or entails all aspects or all actions in the marital life. All actions with your husband or all actions with your wife should be covered by this principle, which is the principle of living with your spouse or your partner in kindness. Also, one of the one-side aspects of rights of men and obligations of wife is that not to fast voluntarily except after his permission. So the women, as mentioned in the Sunnah, are not required or are required to seek the permission of the husband to fast voluntarily. But to fast a wajib, as in Ramadan, or a fard as in Ramadan, or a wajib day as like making up the missed days in Ramadan, or any kind of a wajib fasting, she doesn't have to seek the permission of her husband, only the voluntarily fasting. Why? Because fasting this day will cease or will reduce or will eliminate some of the rights of the husbands, as we will see inshallah in the next rights, and will be elaborated more on this. So from the Sharia perspective, one of the rights of husbands is that if the woman want to fast for 1 day, for 1 week, for specific days, for anything, but it is a voluntarily fasting. So in this case, they have to seek the permission of the husband. Also, one of the rights of husbands, one side rights of husbands is and obligations of wives is not to allow in his house a person whom he dislikes. As a scholar said, whatever the person was, it is not necessary that this person will be specific person, whatever the person was, whatever the kind of relationship, as long as she knows that he hates this person. So in this case, she is not allowed to allow this person into her husband's house. And this is also considered as one of the one-side aspects or one-side rights or obligations of men or women in Islam. Also, one of the rights and obligations is not to leave the house except after his permission. Leaving the house for a very necessary thing may not require the permission, or leaving the house for an urgent interest also may not be required to have the permission. This principle or this duty can be understood from the overall perspective of the Sharia, which is the men are required to leave the house because they are every day have to leave for work. But in general, the women are not required to work. But even not in general, the case is the women are not required to work. So from a perspective of he is leaving the house every day for work, and she doesn't have this urgent necessary to or the urgent task to leave the house. So in this case, this kind of maintaining the household or maintaining what is inside the house, like who is inside the house, like the children, for example, or something like this. So in this case, this right is dedicated or allocated to the men because they are always required to go out for work, and the women are required or requested to take care of the house itself, or what is in the house, or who is in the house. So this is from the allocation of rights and obligations or tasks. Then we can understand this principle. Satisfying his natural needs and beautifying herself for him, and not to cause him to refrain from her. This is one of the important duties of the wife or rights of the husband, which is to satisfy his natural need as a man, beautifying herself for him, not to cause him to refrain from her, as a scholar said, to shave to shave the hair, or to clip the nails, or to take showers, not to have a bad smell or something, anything that cause the man to refrain from the woman. So in this case, this right is one of the major rights of men, and as long as he is satisfied in this regard, many things will be easier for him and for her also, and many things will be perfectly when or perfectly understood or appreciated through satisfying this aspect of the marital relationship between the man and the woman. I'm so sorry, just 1 second. And also, this is one of the, as we said in the previous lecture, also this is one of the mutual rights and obligations between the men and the woman in the marital relationship. Also, one of the duties of wives, or obligations of one of the obligations of the men. And it is a kind of also mutual right and obligation, but it is more related to the men, not the women. This is the right or the authority of direction and disciplining. The authority of direction and disciplining is considered as part of the men's obligations or men's responsibilities. But in general, or in some cases, in some cases, the woman should or can be required to do the same. In certain cases, as we said before, in certain cases, the woman can teach or can advise or can consult the man to do something in line with the Sharia while he was doing or he is doing something in contradiction to the Sharia. So the authority of direction and disciplining is mainly with the men's side, the responsibility of men, but also it covers both parties also. And the authority of direction and disciplining is not a permission to insult or to humiliate or to hurt one of the parties, but it is a responsibility that is governed with the principle which is to live with them in kindness. So in kindness, also in teaching or ordering or commanding him to do something, or even disciplining them to do something. So it is a kind of an obligation which is governed by another obligation also. So the authority of direction and disciplining, and this direction is not only in but mainly it is for the Sharia commands, like to order her or to direct her to maintain prayers or to maintain or covering herself with hijab, and to do different things related to Sharia and also related to the day-to-day life. Also, one of the duties of wives is to travel with the men, to travel with the men. We have in certain cases that the men are required to travel for another country or for another part of the country or for another governorate or state for work or for any kind of circumstances. So in this case, it is required for the women to travel with her, as long as she didn't make a condition in the contract that she will not travel with him anywhere, and she will not leave the city or the house. So in this case, she is required to travel with him with certain conditions, of course. Like, for example, the man may fear the fitna. For example, if he traveled without his wife, the man may fear the fitna. So in this case, as much as she or as long as she can travel with him, she is required to do so. Also, the fitna may be on her side, not on his side. So also she is required to travel with him to block the way to the fitna, or to block the way to deconstruct the relationship or the marital relationship. Also, in some cases, she can refuse to travel with him. For example, if he is traveling for something which is haram, or if she fears that this is not a safe travel, or this place will not be a safe place for her. So in this case, also she can refuse to travel with him, and the burden of traveling, or the obligation of traveling with him will not be considered in this case. And of course, the scholars talked about this in detailed issues in the books of fiqh, and they conditioned this duty of wife with mainly the safety of the wife and the fear of fitna. Also, one of the duties of wife, or the obligations or the rights of husbands, is to serve him and to do the household chores, or to do the household tasks, or the tasks that is inside the house, from the perspective that, of course, as we said before, from the perspective that he has, or he take care of the responsibilities outside the house, to earn provision and to do something, to do anything outside the house, and she take care of the tasks or function inside the house, including making the house clean, or preparing the food, or doing something. In some cases, or some scholars said it is not an obligation to do so, but the majority of scholars said it is an obligation for the wife to do so. The necessary things, not like all tasks, but the necessary things to maintain their life, or to take care of him and herself also, and the children, whoever in the house. So these things can be also an optional if the wife didn't used to do so in her father's house. For example, she is from a high-level family, and she used to have a maid or a nanny, something like this. So also she will not be required to do these tasks in her husband's house, and he is required to provide her also with a maid and a nanny, as long as she used to do, or she used to have so in her husband's or her father's house. And when we say it is not obligation, we didn't say it is a haram. No, of course, if it is not obligation, it can be done from many other aspects, from the voluntarily aspect, from even from living with them in kindness, or from any other aspects. But when we say it is haram, or it is wajib, or it is sunnah, or it is makruh, then we have to be specific about this, and we have to recall what the scholars said in this regard. So as long as she used to do so in her father's house, then she will be required to do so in her husband's house, in kindness and in justice. And it is the opinion of the majority of scholars. Of course, we have nowadays a trend of it is not Islamic to, or it is not an Islamic obligation to do to serve in the house, like to prepare the food or to clean the house, and the man is required to do so. And of course, it is one of the influences or the impacts of the feminist trend that is spread nowadays. This can be observed in some of the decisions or some of the statements of scholars, but the majority of madhabs, the majority of scholars said it is an obligation to do so, as long as she used she used to do so. And of course, the things will be different if she is working or if she have to work along with the husband, and things will be different from many circumstances. But the general principle or the general view of this point is that it is an obligation. Also, one of the obligations is to save the money, as the Prophet ﷺ said that the best woman is the one, when her husband is absent, he will protect him in his dignity and in his family and in his money or his wealth. So saving the money is one of the duties of wives, because the husband may leave for her the money to just do the core tasks, or to do the or to buy the different things of the house. And more than this, of course, but in general, it is a trust. The money that the man is giving to her is a trust. So she is required to keep this trust. Also, one of the mutual rights and obligations is to protect his dignity and honor. And protecting the dignity and honor of men may be, it is the same obligation, or it is the same principle, but it may be different actions from the man side or from the women's side. Protecting the dignity and honor of the man by protecting herself from doing some illegal things, or protecting herself from causing him to be shamed or something like this. Also, in the upbringing of his children, males and females, different things. The general perspective in this is that she doesn't cause him to be in a shameful situation. And of course, it is the same obligation of men. So what maybe after the stations, or these stations of rights and obligations. The next slide, bro. The first station is, or the first point is, he is your easy way to paradise. If we consider the duties or responsibilities of men and women collectively in Islam, we will find that we have a major part of responsibilities that are very hard, extremely hard to women, and they are not required to do so. Attaining the paradise or have the reward of the paradise is relatively in line with the power or the essence of men and women in Islam. The men has more powers, more authorities, more responsibilities, and more difficult steps to attain the paradise other than the women. For example, the men have to pray the salawat in congregation, jama'ah. The women are not. Why? Because the men are usually used to go out of the house, and the men and the women on the opposite side. The men are required to fight against the disbelievers, or fight against the occupiers. The women have the right to be protected, so they are not required to do the jihad, or they are not required to do to struggle in this extreme task of men. So in this case, the woman has a lower expectations of these extreme tasks or these extreme functions, And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said a very powerful and very simple and very beautiful hadith for the women, when he said that if she prays 5 times in her home, in her room, if she prays 5 times, fasted the month of Ramadan, paid the obligatory zakah if there is an obligatory zakah, and she just obeyed her husband, in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to him, enter the paradise from whatever door you want. So, very simple to get the reward, but it is not the same for the men. The men are required to do more things and are required to pay and sacrifice more in this regard. So the men are not required to just merely pray 5 times, fast the month of Ramadan, and be kind with his wife, and that's on. And that's it. He has to do many other things to reach this level of being called from any of the doors of the Jannah. So he is your easy way to paradise. Why? Because it is very easy to. It's not easy, of course. It requires also struggle and require efforts. But in comparison, when you compare what's required from men and what's required from women, you will find it is very easy on the women part, or on the women side. Also, one of the points to be discussed is you have to differentiate when to consider the rights as necessary rights, and when you consider the rights as a recommendation or something which is not necessary. Why? Because sometimes people may mix between different demands, and they may demand or request something which is not important before something which is important. And that's why some struggle and some conflicts between the men and the women may arise. Why? Because of the lack of categorizing the demands of rights to necessary or to obligatory, or or voluntary, or recommendation. Let's have examples. An example of this. For example, it is a right to, or it is an obligation upon the man to provide her with housing and sheltering and maintenance and provision. And it is the same obligation to live with her in kindness in certain levels, or in all levels. Some of these levels are not a wajib, or are not a duty, but it is a recommendation. But it can be also categorized under this principle of living with them in kindness. When the woman may demand a right, for example, she has to categorize or prioritize the rights and obligations, that she has to demand the most necessary right before the other one, and the necessary right before the unnecessary right, and so on and so forth. The immediate right before the delayed right, and so on and so forth. So it is not only to know the rights and obligations, but to be clear and smart when to demand this right, or when to consider this right as a must, as a necessary, immediately, or not. So try to mix between the theoretical knowledge that you may have and the smart way, or the practical way of living with a partner who may fall short into some of the rights and obligations, or fulfilling some of the rights or obligations. So try to be smart in demanding your rights and obligations. Try to prioritize them, and try to make sure that you are demanding the correct right or duty of husband at the correct time and circumstances. Also, one of the points to be discussed is that there is no obligation beyond person's capacity, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها means that every one of us is trying his best to fulfill the duties and obligations and as much as he can or as much as she can. The rest is not accountable or it will be forgiven because this is his capacity, or this is his power, or this is her capacity, or this is her power. So that we have to have the concept, or we have to have the value of forgiveness, that we forgive the other partner, or we excuse or seek or acknowledge the excuses of the other partner in terms of lacking some rights or obligations or lacking any behavior. We have to understand that we are not machines that can do all commands at the same time, but we have to understand that we are human beings. We have feelings, we have powers, which maybe in certain cases may fall short to fulfill the required, even the required or the necessary duties and obligations. So in this case, we have to have this mentality of forgiveness, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving a person from who is doing his best. Also, you have to see if whether your husband or whether your wife is doing his best or her best or no. If she is doing or if he's doing her best in fulfilling all of the or most of the rights and obligations, try to be smart and not to request from him or from her what's beyond his capacity or his power. Why? Because this may damage the relationship, or this may cause some conflicts in the relationship. Although he is an ideal man or she is an ideal woman of doing the best, because this is the principle. As long as he is doing the best, means he is an ideal husband. Or his best, he is an ideal husband. She is doing her best, she is an ideal husband. Even if there is any shortcomings. So try to acknowledge this nature of human beings, and as long as we have the essence of understanding and wisdom, then most of our relationships will be successful, inshallah. Also, one of the points is to how to deal with ungratefulness. We may see many cases, dozens of cases, hundreds of cases, in which a man is trying to do his best, but the woman is not is ungrateful. And on the other hand, the same. The woman is trying to do her best, and the man is ungrateful. So in this case, if there is a forgiveness for 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, 50 times, if there is trying the best from the other side to accept the excuses or accept the shortcomings, but in certain level of these things, you will have to decline, or you have to make a clear separation between forgiveness and humiliation, or between giving excuses or making excuses or accepting excuses and being an absurd person. So there is a difference, of course, and there are many levels between both situations. So in case there is a good mannered wife or husband, and the other partner is trying his best or tried his best and took the necessary time for months and years even to try to reform his partner, but there is no way. So in this case, one of the beauties of Islam is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a makhraj for every difficult situation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making a makhraj for every difficult situation. That's why there is many levels of dealing with the marital conflicts or the conflicts between the men and women. The first level is the internal, what we say, the internal level, or the level that is only both of them are trying to discuss with each other, trying to even debate with each other, trying to reform each other. Otherwise, there is a higher community of the father or the mother or the author or the teacher or the scholar of the family or of the society. Then there is a broader levels of anything that can be done in reforming the relationship. And then finally we have a judiciary level, and you can find the different levels from which it is gradually it's increasing until everyone know where is the wrong point or where is the wrong side. So there are many makhrajs, there are many ways to resolve or to settle the conflicts between the husbands. These are the most important points to be discussed after knowing the rights and obligations before, because when you know the rights and obligations, you will try your best to do them. You will know how to request it, or you will know that you are a good person or a good wife or a good husband, or the opposite, or you will manage to deal with the ungrateful partner. So let's have see the questions. If you have any questions before we see the next step, inshallah. For the duty station number 4, not to allow in his house a person whom he dislikes. What if he doesn't want you to have your mother, your siblings, and nephew and nieces to come, i.e. your family blood ties? Do you still obey him? So we have to differentiate here. And of course, this is a kind of let's say, this is an issue or a problem. In this case, we have to see where is the rulings in this regard. For example, if he is trying to prevent you from going to your mother or going to your father, or prevent you from going to your family, in this case, there is a problem. If he is trying to prevent your mother from coming to your house or to your apartment, also this is a problem. Does he have the right to do so? Some scholars said as long as he commands you to do so, then you have to obey him. But the other scholars, which is the most strongest or the strongest opinion, is that he doesn't have the authority to prevent you from doing good with or from dealing with in good with with your mother or your father or your close family. Why? Because you have to see the principle of obeying the husband. Is it in line with the Sharia or in contradiction with the Sharia? And of course, you have to discuss with each other this important issue, because as long as there is no discussion, there is no agreement, then there will be a conflict. Obeying the husband is lower than, or in a lower level of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to deal with goodness with your mother, with your father, and also it is prohibited to do the opposite, to do حقوق الوالدين, or to behave or to have the lack of responsibility also towards your mother or your father or your close family. So in this case, his command will be in contradiction with the Sharia from two perspectives. The first perspective is that is doing good, the command of doing good to the mother and or the father, and the second aspect is the prohibition of doing bad to the mother and the father. So that is some of the scholars said he doesn't have the authority to reach this level of preventing the woman from communicating with her family. But although we have, or we consider, or we approve this decision or this statement from the scholars that he is not in this level, but at the same time you have to balance, or to make balance. For example, in a case, a woman is requesting to go to her mother for every day, or for a day by day, while the husband is looking from the second perspective, or from the other perspective, that the woman she is required to take more care with the children, for example, or the house, or the house, for example. So in this case, you have to balance, and in every case we may have a different answer, or we may have a different approach, after knowing all circumstances within this issue or within this conflict. So in this case, we can give the due advice to the husband or the due advice to the wife. But in general, as a general principle, the man is not in this level of causing the wife to fall short in her other religious obligations or duties. Second question: how if the husband allow a person a wife didn't like in the house? So we have to understand the principle of allowing a person whom he dislikes into the house from this generality, or from this general perspective of they are always outside the house. For example, they are required to be outside the house, unlike the wives, for example. In the hadith, in the narration upon which the scholars build this principle, it is mentioned only in the men's side, and when the Prophet ﷺ said these are the rights of men and these are the rights of women, he said in the rights, the duties of women, he said that upon the women, they cannot, or they are not allowed to allow anyone her husband is dislike him or her into the house. So when the Prophet ﷺ addressed this issue, he addressed it from the side of women, not the side of men. What if the husband doesn't like the wife's parents in the house? So this is a kind of issue or a problem similar to to the first question, which is they have to reach a mutual settlement or agreement on this problem, because it's considered as a problem. They have to see the reason or why they are, or why he reached this this level of unacceptable relationship between the man and the woman. But in general, it is a kind of problem, and this problem needs a fatwa that is maybe different from different circumstances. Sometimes, if we have this question, we can advise the husband himself to do something, or advise the wife to do something based on the circumstances or the reasons that led to this situation or this wrong situation. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The question is, if ex-husband is not a Muslim, does the current husband who is practicing Muslim take precedence as a leader of the children in the household they are in? Yes, as long as they are in his house, then he also have the precedence to educate them and to give them nasiha, or to discipline them in the correct way. But at the same time, of course, we cannot deprive the other father or their real father from his rights to see them or to communicate with them, of course. But I don't know the circumstances, but in general, as long as they are in the house of the Muslim husband, in this case, the rules of the house or the leading of the house and whoever inside the house is the responsibility of the Muslim husband. Inshallah, next lecture we will try to focus on the fiqh perspective on the khitbah and nikah. Inshallah, we'll try our best to cover the rulings, the fiqh rulings of khitbah and nikah, inshallah. Ameen wa iyyakum. Do you have any other questions?
No, Ustaz.
Yes, ma'am.
There's no more questions.
Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. Barakallahu fikum. May Allah increase us in iman and knowledge and wisdom. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala write us in his righteous servants and pious servants. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all al-firdaus al-a'la min al-jannah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.